Namaskar and welcome to For the Record. Tonight we'll be speaking with the Minister for Economy, Ayaz Sayed Qayyum, about the 2020-2021 budget announcement which was presented in Parliament on Friday. A number of concessions announced and measures designed to assist not only jobless Fijians but vulnerable communities, vulnerable families, as well as businesses who've been struggling for a while now to maintain their business, to stay open in what is a slumped economy caused by COVID-19. And we will now bring the Minister into the discussion via video conferencing on Zoom. Mr. Sayed Qayyum, thank you very much for joining us this evening to talk about your new budget presented in Parliament. Now, I'll get right into it.
So thank you for having us, and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. As we can see, even in the beginning, video conferencing presenting a few hiccups, but we'll get right into it. It's a fairly conservative budget by any degree. Obviously, the government has not moved away from its formula, a pro-people and a pro-economy budget. A lot of people had expected that there would be some digression from previous budgets and that there would be something new announced. What I suppose I'm asking is how, in an environment of COVID-19, have you managed to stay the course?
Well, I think, Edwin, as announced in the budget, the reality of the matter is that there has been a lot of flexibility that needed to be built into the budget, as we've done with the COVID-19 response budget, and we subsequently did it with the 2020-2021 budget. Because the reality of the matter is, as globally seen, there is absolutely no certainty in many of the areas. In many of the larger countries have struggled with the uncertainties. And for us, in terms of the budget specific, obviously we needed to ensure that we build in that level of flexibility into our budget to ensure that we don't, for example, overstate our revenue, we don't understate our expenditure, but we have the ability to have some form of maneuverability, but more so to err on the side of being more conservative with the revenue projections and factor in unexpected expenditure. As we saw that when we presented the 2020-2021 budget, we in fact did not have the second wave. There was no active COVID cases in Fiji. However, we still were very conservative with our revenue projections. And then I can tell you, as announced in the budget, that we had, in fact, in the 2020-2021 budget, had a projected deficit as a percentage of GDP at 20.2%. But in fact, our deficit is now 11.5%. We had projected debt as a percent of GDP to be about 83.4%. At the close of this financial year, debt will be 79.2% as a percentage of GDP. So from that perspective, obviously, we have managed our expenses, we manage our operational expenditure. We have also been able to reach out to our development partners, and they have recognized the unique situation that Fiji is in. And because they have a lot of confidence in our financial management, of our budgetary management, and many of the legal provisions we've actually put in place to ensure there's, far more transparency than what existed in the Fijian public financial system a decade ago. And in fact, in the budget, we've announced further amendments to the Financial Management Act to bring about even more transparency and accountability, and indeed putting in place medium to long-term strategies in respect of our debt strategy, in respect of how do we reduce our debt, but also in terms of fiscal strategy going forward. So that's the fundamental premise on which the budget has been formulated. The budget obviously is formulated on, as we continuously highlighted, it started off with the Honorable Prime Minister making the announcement in respect of the workplace conditions regarding vaccines, and highlighting the need for people to understand that the panacea out of all of this is actually being vaccinated. So you'll see a number of the announcements we made is premised on Fijians achieving the targeted rate, 80% of the target population. It works out to be about 470,000 Fijians, adult Fijians, getting vaccinated. Vaccinated means getting first and second dose. We've set ourselves a target of 31 October. It is critically important, as also highlighted in the budget, that we need to understand that our ability to get vaccinated at that particular level of the percentage of the population means that it gives us the ability to be able to open up our borders, but more importantly, for other countries to think and believe that Fiji is safe to allow the citizens to travel to for tourism purposes. That is critically important. I think a lot of people don't realize that if you don't actually achieve those, the target percentage of population vaccination, then you will in fact be in a situation where countries will say, hang on, it's not safe to travel to Fiji. And therefore, we will not allow our tourists to go to that destination. We will say for them to go to other destinations. And we've seen this. I mean, countries have blocked their citizens from traveling to XYZ countries because of whatever reasons, whether there's been, variants, etc. So now in this next phase of the global economic outlook, the tourists firstly will need to get permission from their country to be able to travel to certain destinations. And when the tourist actually is looking to going to different destinations, they will actually look at, firstly, number one, whether that place is safe to travel to. If I go to that destination, will I have a higher chance of contracting COVID-19? And of course, they'll also be very price sensitive. This is why we have in the last budget and in this budget provided numerous incentives, not just for the tourism investment sector side of things, but also in respect of the tariff rates, etc., to make the Fijian destination a lot more attractive for the intended tourists. So vaccination is very much also linked to, therefore, government revenue. Now, you will see again in the projections that we have been extremely conservative with our revenue. We had, in fact, projected revenue of from non-tax revenue, for example, in the 2020-2021, we had projected revenue about $207.9 million, but we had a revenue of $700 million. From tax revenue, it was slightly down. We had projected a revenue of $1.465 billion, but the revenue came in at $1.410 billion. Now, just slightly off the mark of the budget because essentially of the lockdowns we've had. As you now see that we have now been allowing for certain level of economic and commercial activity under various protocols. So, I mean, overall revenue was $1.67 billion projected, and now revised is $2.1 billion. So, an increase of about $400 million. So, for this financial year, the one that the budget was presented to, we are projecting total revenue about $2.085 billion, just slightly. In fact, if you compare to the revenue of what we have collected this financial year in 2020-2021, we are projecting to collect slightly less, about a few 10 million, about 40 million dollars less. Now, so we are being extremely conservative. This does not factor in the opening of the borders even to limited travel. So obviously, if we have limited travel starting in, say, months of December, because we're all fully vaccinated, we will be able to increase our revenue. Government will be able to then continue with the various programs. So you will see in the budget, we have made a number of announcements in terms of policy initiatives that will help ordinary Fijians meet their day-to-day costs. So apart from the unemployment benefit that we have offered in a sustained manner for 6 months, and both for the formal and informal sector, which is unprecedented, we have also, factored in other types of assistance that spans throughout the year. So, for example, things like payment of market vendors' fees, we said that's guaranteed. Market vendors, casual or formal, don't have to pay the fees for the next 1 year. And it's not simply us waiving the fees. Government will actually pay the municipal councils the fees on behalf of the market vendors. In the same way, government will pay on behalf of the fishers, or people, fishermen and women who go out and fish. Any of the fees that they have to pay for Ministry of Fisheries, we pay on their behalf. BDM, any of their fees, we will actually pay, because we have to run these government agencies and departments and other ministries, at the arm's length transaction. We actually have to pay and allocate funding for that, whether it's LTA. So we know, for example, taxi drivers, minibus drivers, carrier drivers, bus drivers, really, because of lockdowns, because of limited travel, because of curfew hours, have not had enough income. Some of them have not driven for weeks. Some of them maybe over a month or 2 months. So we recognize that. So what we are saying, if your license is coming up for renewal, and it is not, necessarily cheap for them to renew the licenses, government will pay it on your behalf. Some of them, because they are PSV, license holders, some of them actually have to go and do a defensive driving course. We'll pay it on your behalf to LTA. LTA will invoice us, we'll pay the fees on their behalf. Municipal council will invoice us, we'll pay the fees on their behalf. The bus companies who every time go and park at the bus stand, they have to, every time the bus goes there, they actually have to pay a fee to the municipal councils. And some of it is comparatively low, it's 30 cents, 40 cents each time the bus goes, but it accumulates. So that's some form of assistance for them. So all of these actually in everyday life. So in the same way, for example, if somebody is going to apply for a job, some university student or some person who's been unemployed, if they go to a potential new employer, nowadays the employers say, bring your police record. We want to see, whether you've had a bad track record or not, whether you committed a crime. For them to actually go and get a police record, the police charges over $50. So again, we're saying that fee for you will be paid for you on your behalf by government. So we've looked at various aspects of daily living that people actually have to fork out money for, and that's how we've assisted them. Because if you look at the theme behind the budget, is to provide a helping hand. Similarly, for example, micro, small, medium enterprises. I'll give you an example. If I own a small coffee shop, now if I'm selling 100 cups of coffee in a day, now I'm only selling 10 or 5, I still have to turn on the coffee machine. I still have to turn on my other appliances. Now, the electricity rate that they pay is the commercial rate, which is in excess of 40 cents or so. Now, what we are saying is that we've asked EFL, we've done a arrangement with them, that now these businesses will pay the domestic rate, which is about 32 cents a unit. We will pay the difference between 32 cents and 40 cents for these businesses, because we want them to actually remain open. We want them to keep people, for them to keep people employed. In that way, we are defraying some of their costs. Made certain arrangements with the EFL in terms of giving them a bit longer time to pay their bills. People still have to pay for things, for example, these businesses, but actually, at least we are targeting them and providing them assistance. So these are very critical, this is a very critical juncture in our economy, in our sort of socio-economic development.
And we'll take a quick break now. When we come back, we'll continue discussions on the 2021-2022 budget. Welcome back to For the Record. Tonight we are speaking with the Minister for Economy, Eyas Seyed Qayyum, as he elaborates on the 2021-2022 budget.
Nobody prior to last year, February, March, and thought that we would be going through this phase. Nobody could have in their right mind actually, prophesized that this will happen in March 2020. People have made comments in the past that because of climatic changes, because of the rise in temperatures, humanity could face various types of pandemics, the rise of various viruses, because, there are now ice melting, there could be various viruses there in the North and South Poles, whatever different scientific theories there are. But nobody actually knew it would actually happen last year. And it would happen in such a dramatic manner. Now, as we said, this is not, a cyclone comes and goes, it blows for about maybe 2 days, a flood comes and goes, and then you start rebuilding. In this particular instance, it's been continuously going on for 17 months. So, that's the situation we are in. And we have taken an approach that we all have a certain level of responsibility. Government has a social contract with citizens. We need to provide that level of hand-holding. We already started doing it last year. We paid in excess of $200 million to people in the formal sector, where they were able to withdraw $220 a fortnight, and those who were in reduced hours. We paid directly $205 million to the FNPF scheme. Of course, others who had enough money in the general account, they were able to withdraw that at 220 a fortnight. Those who continue to have funds in the GL, the general account, in the general ledger, they'll be able to continue to do that, withdraw that amount. But those who don't, of course, will now go on to this 360 every 3 months payment system. But what we are saying, please, if we are going to work together as a nation, you have to go and get vaccinated, because we have a certain level of responsibility, because for government to continue to provide these types of assistances, to continue to provide this type of support, and also to plan for the long term, we have to ensure that we pre-position ourselves as far as the health risk is concerned, firstly for our own selves, for us as individual citizens to look after ourselves, our own health and our family's health, and then of course the domestic health and well-being of our economy. Because you know that with lockdowns and different area containment zones being created, people cannot move around. There's a disruption to trade, commerce, ability to go to work. If you are vaccinated, and our health, experts say, okay, it's okay now to safe to travel. We've seen countries like Israel, UK, USA, and various other countries that actually have achieved a particular level of herd immunity. They're able to open up the shops and businesses. So that's in the first instance for domestic purposes. Secondly, for international purposes, in terms of tourism, we need to have the ability to be able to go out to the world. That's why we've got this digital registration of vaccines, the process of it. You have to apply and get registered. As announced in the budget, we're also going to have vaccine passports. It's critically important because that will open up the door for our people also to travel to other countries too. Because other countries will need to know, okay, what have you been vaccinated with? Is it, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, what other types of vaccines they are? When were you vaccinated? Are you fully vaccinated? And secondly, have you had a COVID-19 test? Because now most of the countries, it would appear now that you have to do some form of test to enter into other countries, notwithstanding the fact that you may be vaccinated. So, and that means that you may not have to do quarantine. Similarly, when people come to Fiji, we need to be able to feel confident and comfortable, firstly, that they are vaccinated, that they have met various protocols. They will also need to be assured that the hotel that they're going to go to, that everybody there is vaccinated also. And they may want to see proof of it. Travel agents may want to see proof of it. So if they, for example, going to the Fijian hotel to be able to sell their rooms and market themselves, you'll need to say, okay, we have, these 200 employees, and these are people all vaccinated. And, this is the record of them and when they got vaccinated, the first dose, the second dose, and what they received, and how they're going through the COVID-19 test. So it's a holistic approach. So we have a responsibility to be able to get vaccinated. We similarly have said that if we don't achieve the target, it will actually have economic consequences. And those consequences could actually amount into us, further restraining our expenditure. If you look at our expenditure, almost all the government ministries have had expenditure cuts. A number of capital projects that we would have liked last year, this year to implement, we've actually put them on hold. We are carrying on with the ones that were contracts already signed or capital projects that already started, like a number of police stations around Fiji, the maternity hospital. There's obviously some construction that's going on in terms of refurbishment, whether it's the Lambasa Hospital and various other locations. But we're also looking at public-private partnerships, as announced that we had called for expressions of interest last year for private sector companies to build premises for us. We don't have any capital outlay, but the building will be built, and we agreed to actually lease them for a particular period of time. In the same way, government currently pays all of the rent that UN offices pay in Fiji. Now, we obviously want all the UN offices to stay in Fiji. They want to be housed in one building. At the moment, they're strewn all across the CBD in Suva. We want them to be in one particular building, have a good building, a UN house. And again, they've seen about 3 or 4 locations. The private companies are willing to build it for them, and government will simply pay the rent. We have to negotiate the best rent. So these types of projects will, in fact, add to the economic activity in Fiji, because when people build things, when construction takes place, people get hired, people get paid wages, money circulates in the economy, VAT gets paid. So all of these things are taken into account. So essentially, that's the message through the budget. And we have to ensure that we are able to continue to provide, things that we are now considered to be part of our socioeconomic culture, if you like. Things like free education. Primary and secondary school must be free. Children who come from families who cannot afford to pay for normal transportation costs, we will subsidize. Whether they catch a punt, whether they go in a minibus in the RSL area, or whether they go by normal omnibus or buses. Number two, there are very poverty alleviation schemes we have. We give food vouchers to rural pregnant women, disability allowance, social pension scheme for people over the age of 65 who have never had FNPF before, poverty alleviation, abandoned children. All of that we are continuing to fund. Now, it is in everybody's interest, in every Fijian's interest, the civil servant's interest, every employee's interest, that we do get vaccinated, because it means that government will continue to be able to generate that levels of revenue that's required to actually fund these projects. Civil servants, for example, have not had a pay cut. Now, notwithstanding the fact, for example, in the case of teachers, some of them have not taught for months, but we're still paying them the salary, full salary. Some of them have been acting in various positions, whether head of a particular department, etc. We're still paying them the acting allowance. And we, of course, expect them that when schools open, there's going to be a concentrated period in trying to get our kids up to speed with the curriculum, up to speed with the syllabus. So we will need the ability to contribute that. So all of these things hinges upon our ability to get vaccinated. We've also been extremely transparent about it. We have said we could come back for a review to Parliament to do another budget. Because if we, for example, don't meet the target of the percentage of population that needs to be vaccinated, it will have an impact on revenue. It will have an impact on whether we open up the domestic market to ourselves freely or not. And if that actually we continue with restrictions, obviously government's capacity to collect revenue will decrease. Our ability to collect other forms of revenue, even from international trade or tourism, will also be affected dramatically. So we need to come back for a review. However, if, God willing, everybody gets the sense and the focus to get vaccinated very quickly, the sooner we get vaccinated, the sooner we can talk to other countries in a more formal manner to say, look, our development partners, we've now achieved our target. Let's now formalize some form of travel. Let's formalize some form of bubble. And believe you me, that can happen very, very quickly. We've already had a couple of countries, as I've said, we're already talking informally about, mutual recognition of vaccination programs. So that's critically important. So essentially, that in a nutshell, that's what the budget is about. It also is about, for example, looking at specific areas that we can empower people. You'll see there's a lot of emphasis, for example, in the digital space. A lot of small businesses, for example, have been saying that, they want to have a payment gateway. And this is the example I used in Parliament. So, for example, if there's a lady who runs a cake shop in Nambua, and, she wants to increase her business. Nowadays, we have a lot of people ordering things online. But a small business like hers, if she wants to be able to get you to buy her cake online, pay her online, it'll cost about $20,000, $30,000, if not more, through a normal commercial bank to get a payment gateway. Where you go to the website and you see the cake, okay, this is chocolate cake with icing. I want this is $50 or $20. You order it, you pay online, you give the address, and she can deliver it to your house, or she can deliver it to wherever else you want to give it to as a gift or whatever. Now, there's also a lot of Fijians living offshore. Now, a lot of them would want to, for example, somebody in the British Army wanting to order a cake for his mother, who may be still living in Fiji, and he can send 50 pounds worth of money to buy a cake. At the moment, he cannot order that because the lady in Nambua does not have a payment gateway. So we had a discussion with the Reserve Bank of Fiji. We've spoken to VTCAT. VTCAT is a payment gateway that's been established by Vodafone. A lot of companies actually are putting their goods and services, and you can go online and order. Now, there's obviously a fee for that. There's a monthly fee for that. So we have, through negotiations with RBF, we're going to share those costs. And the lion's share will in fact be paid by the RBF, but on the understanding that the Fijian government will facilitate, we'll work together with these businesses, in particular MSMEs, and using the Ministry of Commerce, Trade and Tourism also. So these are the kind of synergies we've developed. Similarly, we know that, for example, students at the moment, university students, and of course, year 13 students, they're a very critical group of students, the year 13 students, because they need to graduate. So then year 13 becomes empty, and then all the others, class 1 at the moment can move to class 2, 3, up all the way through. Then it creates a space at the bottom rung in class 1 for those in kindy to come up into class 1. So we need the year 13 students to be graduated. Now, they need access to data, for example. They need access to data, and we will, through again our discussions with ATH, we are now going to have a data program where we'll give them X percentage of data through the government and ATH to all of these students, all Fijian university students. The reason I say this is because obviously we have some foreign students that are at some of our universities. This is not applicable for them, but only Fijian students at universities and also year 13 students. So that'll be available from the 1st of August. And in fact, signing the MOU next week in respect of these two matters that I've also I've just mentioned. Similarly, also, M-Pesa. Now, a lot of people, now the disbursement, the most common form of disbursement of this unemployment benefit is through M-Pesa or MyCash, which is the digital platform, digital Fiji platform. What we are saying is that for them, a lot of people we've seen who go and line up to get the cash. They don't actually have to do that because you can make payments. A lot of people are using their payments to pay directly for the EFL, electricity, etc. Or they go to shops and supermarkets where they simply put their phone, the QR code, they get money deducted automatically. But the point now is that some areas, the corner shops don't actually have M-Pesa facility or MyCash facility. So again, we've said, we've spoken to Vodafone, we actually want to ensure that all these shops have it. There's a fee, some of them don't want to pay. So we said, we'll pay that upfront, for 1 year. So in this way, the Fijians who actually get unemployment benefits through M-Pesa or MyCash have a shop very close by. They don't actually have to go and queue up to get cash. They simply buy the goods from the shop itself.
Minister,
so those are the kind of the overall parameters of the budget itself.
Thank you for that, Minister. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back for more discussions shortly.
Thank you.
Welcome back. We are speaking tonight with the Minister for Economy, Eyas Seyed Qayyum, about the new budget announced on Friday. Minister, if we can just quickly talk about revenue generation. Obviously, you have confidence in the local economy to be able to generate enough revenue to sustain a lot of these government initiatives and programs for the next financial year. And consequently, you've introduced or announced a lot of measures, a lot of concessions, a whole host of them designed to assist businesses. How do you expect or anticipate the economy to react in the next 12 months?
Edwin, I didn't get the first part of your question. I didn't understand what you were saying.
Yes, I was saying, based on the revenue figures, revenue collection figures that have been announced, obviously the government has confidence in the local economy to be able to sustain itself and the government programs. So that combined with the list of concessions that have been announced, how do you now expect the economy to react in the next 12 months? What sort of flow-on effects do you expect?
So what sort of concessions you're talking about? You mean the tax concession?
The tax concessions, the relief programs and policies that have been announced, the bill payments and what have you for small businesses across the board?
Well, they're two completely separate things. I mean, tax concessions are areas where we're trying to incentivize new business. So tax concessions, for example, have been given for the agriculture sector. It has no direct, immediate effect on expenditure. So what we're saying, if you invest, over $2 million in the agriculture sector, you get a tax holiday for 20 years. So essentially what that means is that, if you start a business in agriculture, you don't pay tax for 20 years. It's got no immediate impact on our expenditure, on our bottom line. Similarly, for example, if you are going to invest in a BPO, business processing offices, those kind of facilities where you have call centers, data centers. We incentivize people to actually set up businesses in that area. We're incentivizing, in particular, Australian and New Zealand companies to come and use Fiji and Fijians, young Fijians in particular, for their call centers and data processing. The reason why I'm saying young Fijians is because if you look at the profile, the demographics of the people who are currently engaged in the BPO sector, they are predominantly between the ages of 20 and 35. So there's a lot of potential in that area, but we've given tax incentives. That's very different to expenditure from your bottom line. So, for example, what you just mentioned. So if we're going to pay, for example, for people's birth certificates for the next 1 year, it has an impact on our bottom line. So we may have made an allocation for X number of dollars, and that gets allocated as expenditure. Now, as I said earlier on in the first segment, that our revenue projection is actually slightly lower than what we will be collecting this year. So we're not over-projecting. And number two, I think it is very important, and a lot of people, do what I call very shallow analysis of these figures and the economy, etc. And of course, that does not only mean journalists do that, but also a lot of politicians do it too. So if you look at, on page 320 of the budget estimates, we've actually set out what our projections are. So direct taxes, we're saying income tax will be about $457 million. Social responsibility tax, $412,000. Fringe benefit tax, $4,564. And then you have the capital gains tax. All of these are projected revenue. Then we have what we call indirect taxes, VAT, which is our largest contributor to our revenue. We estimate about $1.1 billion. Customs tax, obviously, in terms of customs duties that people pay. Service, obviously, turnover tax is no longer applicable. But, water resource tax, all of these are actually, factored into our revenue collection. And then, as I also said today, what we have called non-tax revenue. So, fees and charges, there's still fees and charges for various things. If you want to get a passport, all those types, we get actually dividends paid to us from shares that we own in various companies. And we have, a number of initiatives. So sometimes we, for example, get budget support that is unbudgeted for, and we hope to obviously do that. We're currently in some very delicate discussions with our development partners. As I said, they appreciate what we are doing. So those are the sort of, non-tax revenue that we anticipate to collect. So So my comment to you is that there's no over-projection of revenue. There is definitely been an appetite, and indeed we put that in practice in terms of reducing our expenditure. So, for example, we've said that civil service, the current positions will remain. In other words, no ministry will create new positions, except we have a Ministry of Health, for obvious reasons, Health and Medical Services, the Fijian Police Force in terms of recruitment, Ministry of Communications, again, for obvious reasons, because we're developing things like vaccine passports and various digital work that's been carried out now throughout government. And I think Ministry of Local Government gets about 4 new positions. All the other ministries, there's absolutely no increase in the number of positions in the ministries. They, of course, will have vacancies on existing positions. It's up to those ministries through their permanent secretaries, whether they fill in those vacancies, whether they merge different positions, but they most certainly won't be getting any more funding for increase in staffing numbers. You will see in the budget, we've allocated $5 million for rollout of FPOS services throughout all the government ministries and agencies. So, currently, if you go to the hospital, you have to pay cash. We heard stories previously when somebody went in emergency, have to get their family admitted, saying to the paying ward, they'll say, go and bring $600 now or $200 now. It's in the middle of the night. They have to then get a taxi or jump in their car, go to an ATM and get the money out and then bring the cash. But now if you have FPOS services, they can simply use the ATM card, and most people actually have the ATM cards or Easy Card or whatever it may be called, whether it's BSP, ANZ, Westpac, Bread, Baroda, HFC, any of those banks. So I hope I have not missed out any of those banks. So the point is that we're improving services, which will mean less human intervention, which will also mean more adoption of technology, better efficiency in services. We've said to the permanent secretaries, move away from unnecessary expenditure. Sometimes, some ministries more than others are prone to cutting a cake at every single occasion, or just because there's a small opening, they have to go and get ribbons and all sorts of things. And these things all cost money, whether it's salu, etc. So, we can cut back on all those kind of government expenditure to make it a lot more lean and a lot more efficient, and we obviously have done that. So that's, essentially the premise on which the expenditure is pegged at, and also the revenue.
Minister, thank you very much for that. We are due for another break. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to For the Record. We are speaking with the Minister for Economy, Ayaz Sayed Qayyum. Sir, one of the interesting announcements in the budget was that there will be free sanitary pads provided for girls in schools at a time when people would have expected the government to cut back on some programs. You've in fact introduced new programs. The other one being the bus shuttle services which will be introduced in Nasinu and parts of the West. How were you able to include this into the budget at a time where we are surrounded by COVID-19?
Okay, if I could just draw a point of difference between the two. The second one, which is the suburban shuttle stations, essentially, it's a capital outlay. It's not an ongoing operational expenditure. The provision of sanitary pads for young girls, young women, essentially is a operational expenditure, ongoing operational expenditure. So, the reality of the matter is that when you have, an economic downturn, as we've seen generally in most patriarchal societies, in particular for young girls, young women, a lot of their personal needs, etc., does get, pushed to the sideline. As we saw in the days prior to free education being introduced, and we've had numerous stories about this, is that when the days when people actually had to pay school fees and they had, large families, parents generally gave preference, if they could not afford to send all their children to school, gave preference to their boys or the young men going to school as opposed to the girls, so they would actually stay home. And, the mentality being they'll stay home, they'll learn all the sort of how to cook and clean and all of that, and then because they'll get married off in any case. And so the patriarchal notion being that the husband will be the breadwinner and will provide them, so they don't necessarily need to get educated. So they've actually pushed down the priority list. Obviously, that has changed. The dynamics has changed dramatically. Free education does help. We now have more females in schools than males. And of course, in university, numbers have all gone up because of toppers and tells. So in the same way, when you have people, for example, having lack of access to income, when there's a downturn in the economy, those type of needs for young girls may actually get marginalized. And there's numerous studies that have been done on this. Even when in good times also, a lot of these sort of basic sanitary hygiene type issues for young girls actually gets marginalized, in particular from low-income families. So we recognize that, we know the effects of COVID-19. So we have, in fact, we thought about this program about 2 years ago. It took a lot of planning. We had to work out the logistics. As you know, that it's a very personal matter. For a lot of the young girls, they would be menstruating for the first time. The whole privacy issues come into play. How do you handle it? If somebody does need access to sanitary pads, what system will be developed? It's not like something going and buying, getting a carton of milk. It's carton of milk is something you just drink, but sanitary pads is something very personal. If you're in a co-ed school, there could be issues of being embarrassed about it. Who's going to handle it? All of that has been worked out. So this will be rolled out, of course, to the Ministry of Education, Heritage and Arts. We also want to tie that in with the Ministry of Health, where girls' health could also be checked. Issues related to reproductive health. Also things like it could also be able to address and provide counseling in respect of some areas we have high levels of teenage pregnancy. The whole area will be dealt with holistically. And As announced in the budget, we've said that the girls who need them will be given vouchers, so they don't actually have to queue up and, somebody hands them sanitary pads. It's actually embarrassing, for a lot of them. Culturally, a lot of people don't feel comfortable telling them, oh, this week, therefore I've got, I'm mensurating, so therefore I'll go and get the pad. So, the idea is that they'll be given vouchers that they can go and redeem at, at the local store and supermarket at their own convenience, in their own privacy. There are some challenges, of course, in the maritime areas where there may not be availability of these kind of stores. So we are looking at how to, distribute this. And there may need to be some physical handing out of this, but it could be done by, say, the female teachers and with a particular level of, privacy protocols built around that. But overall, it's about, female health protection and also giving them that level of dignity which is required. So that's essentially the program. It has been, we talked about it, in fact, about 18 months ago to introduce this. And there has been a lot of, toing and froing and trying to work out the logistics. And, it will be rolled out very soon once school starts. Now, the other second matter you talked about is essentially a capital outlay. And we don't believe that this capital outlay is, in fact, going to be that costly. There's an allocation you'll see of $2 million. Obviously, the $2 million won't necessarily cater for all the 3 sites that we've identified being completed in the next financial year, but most certainly work can commence on all of them, and we expect one of them to be actually completed within this next financial year. The idea is that we will have in large pockets of population where your Balelevus of Fiji, the Nakasis, Field 40, Tawakumbu, all that back area, the large pockets of population. You'll see markets and supermarkets develop in those areas, but the bus routes actually in those areas, because all bus routes emanate from the bus station, and the old colonial way of urban planning was very much around having one big bus station, the market next to it, and all routes go from there and come back to that bus station. So now, because areas have developed quite extensively and very densely populated areas. So if I'm living in Nepani, for example, if I want to go to Balelevu, there's no direct bus route that goes from there. If I'm in Nandawa and working in the garment factory at lunchtime, if I want to go to Balelevu and, for example, maybe access the Balelevu Health Center or access the Housing Authority office, or maybe go and do quickly some grocery shopping, I can't do that because there's no bus that runs that town center in Balelevu. I either have to take a taxi. If I walk, it may take me 45 minutes or half an hour, and my lunch will be finished. So it's also, to provide a level of convenience. People who are living in different parts of that area can travel to these centers. They may want to, for example, go to, in this particular case, the Roots, shopping center. We are also building a couple of government, offices in these areas. So it'll provide that level of, transportability of people and in a cheaper way. So, you have buses running, and the idea is to have smaller buses. You have your 21-seater buses. You have a less of a carbon footprint. Eventually, we have plans in the next few years to roll out electric buses. It becomes a lot more easier, so we reduce our carbon footprint even further. And I think the other point that we also want to make is that people then don't actually have to travel long distances. People that can actually stay within their suburbs. It makes things a lot more convenient for them. So if you have a bus that starts from Balelevu, goes to, say, Langere Market and goes to other areas, at the moment, one of the complaints by some of the market vendors at Langere is that, there's not easy connectability to their market. In this way, people can very easily go, okay, let's go and buy my veggies or my fish or whatever it is from Langere Market and come back home quickly. So it's to increase convenience, it's to reduce our carbon footprint, increase accessibility, and reduce the cost of public transportation, and also, of course, increase accessibility. So these are very important areas. So if you see in terms of capital projects, we have not started any major capital project that's got massive outlays that has not been announced previously. But this is a smaller one, but it has a huge impact in respect of people's ability to access services in a more convenient fashion.
Minister, we're just about to wrap up for this evening. My second last question with regards to the budget is actually related to financial management amendments, which we expect to be elaborated on in Parliament when debate begins. But there was mention of provisions for political parties to explain any political promises that they make, and for the Minister for Economy to present a fiscal update in Parliament before elections. Can you elaborate on those?
Sure. You know, this is not a one-off. There has been a series of amendments to our Financial Management Act and the various regulations to create a lot more accountability between the government ministries, between the Ministry of Economy and the head expenditure, the different ministries or different agencies. And also in terms of audit purposes. So you will see, for example, in the Financial Management Act, the bill that's been tabled or will be tabled is more about also increasing capacity for internal audit to make sure that we're able to identify very quickly the areas that some of the ministries may be lapsing in. There's also been a problem. We've said that the environment regulations need to be looked at the moment. Some of the permanent secretaries and the accounting sections in some of the individual ministries tend to treat, Seg 1 as a standard expenditure group as a slush fund, so they move funds around. So we need to have proper accountability in that respect. And part and parcel of this, of course, is to, for example, also part of the amendment is for government to be able to lay out its fiscal strategy. A medium-term fiscal strategy, which also needs to be presented to Parliament. So Parliament is also aware, not just simply, when budget is presented on a yearly basis. At the moment, there's a requirement to present the accounts to Parliament. We simply table it in respect to the financial performance. But this is also about strategy that needs to be approved by Cabinet, that needs to be, put to a table in Parliament for Parliament's information. Also, there's only deviations allowed if there's what we call economic shocks. So if there's a cyclone, if there is, for example, a pandemic. But in all other instances, we must stick to that strategy, the debt strategy, the fiscal strategy, because it gives certainty. And, it's not just only about, for developing countries, only about presenting to Parliament, but also our development partners, because they need to understand what exactly is happening. Now, as a result of these kind of accountability provisions that we brought about in the past number of years, you have a country like Australia, for the first time last year, started giving us direct budget support. It's never done it. They've only funded what we call, aid in kind for various projects, build a school here, there, etc., or give to, civil society groups, but never direct budget support. New Zealand has done the same thing because we've actually jumped through the hoops. And to be able to, get that level of acceptability and credibility and integrity in our financial management system, this amendment creates even further, credibility, integrity. So one of the requirements, as you highlighted also, is prior to elections, the Minister for Economy must give a fiscal update to say, this is the state of the economy now. These are the finances now. So everybody knows, so government cannot go and hoodwink the voters, nor should any other political party go and hoodwink the voters. They cannot go and say, their revenue is this much, when in fact they may be completely lying. Nor can we go out, for example, as the incumbent and say, this is what it is, because we don't actually have a requirement currently to present those reports formally or make that information available formally. Equally, there will be a requirement an amendment, a consequential amendment to the Electoral Act, where any political party, any candidate that also holds out any financial promise needs to also say how will they, for example, finance it. At the moment, political parties at the moment, in particular those who are, not incumbents, those who are in opposition or not in government at all, they simply go around and say, don't worry, we will make this free, we will do this, we will cut back on that, and we will give you free funding for all of this. They simply just don't have to say, how will they fund it? And people say, oh, wow, wonderful. Of course, they're not even accountable at all. So this provision, as in a number of countries, when you present an alternative financial strategy, when you present an alternative expenditure or focus in policy, you need to be able to say, how will you fund it? It's very fair. And in fact, it's very transparent. Many people in their manifestos write X, Y, Z, we'll do X, Y, Z, but they don't actually say, how will they fund it? Where will they get the money from? So that's one of the provisions that we will be presenting to Parliament as part of this budget package.
Minister, we are almost out of time. Very quickly, last question. I'd like to read out something to you that SODELPA has put out. It is a release to the budget, and quote unquote by the leader of SODELPA, Honorable William Ngavoka. It's a last budget before the 2022 election, so it was expected that there will be a lot of giveaways and goodies on offer. It also goes on to say that this may be the first time in the history of Fiji where one man is in control of the biggest chunk of the budget. The Minister for Economy has mismanaged the Fiji economy and cannot be trusted with further management of the budget. That is part of their press release sent out today. I would like to get your reactions very quickly. What would you say to this release from SODELPA about you as Minister?
Where do I start, Edwin? Look, I mean, I wanted to specifically focus on the budget, not to be here this evening to respond to, silly comments by people who also, as we have seen, the modus operandi of most of these political parties are politicizing it, but more so they are personalizing matters. I mean, I understand there's recently some get-together where they had with some NGOs and sort of making fun of people resigning, etc. That has never happened in the history of Fiji, this kind of personalization of matters. The reality of the matter is that, SODELPA is a completely fragmented political party. They have absolutely no unity in respect of their policy outlay. They don't have an alternative budget. They have never presented an alternative budget. They've never funded any of the policy announcements they've made. They've not provided any accountability of it. You have a leader of opposition, but at the same time, from the same party, you have a leader of the party. You have their backbenchers shooting off in different directions. I mean, so should I give it credibility by actually responding to quite a obtuse comment such as that? The simple point is this: if there was mismanagement of the economy, World Bank, ADB, the Australian government, the New Zealand government would not be participating, the Japanese government would not be participating in the Fijian economy and the financial system of this country in the manner in which it is doing today.
Minister, thank you very much for joining us this evening. That is all the time we have, unfortunately, as much as we would like to continue discussions.
Thank you.
Naka. And that was For the Record for this evening. The Parliament will debate on the new budget from the 26th of this month. That was your show this evening. Modemanta.